Hi everyone, I'm Andy and this is the AI Breakdown. Welcome to your weekly news edition, where I'll cover what happened in AI last week and why it matters. Coming up this week, Anthropic's Fable 5 is back online, and the White House is close to a deal that would formalize how every frontier model gets released. OpenAI has offered the US government 5% of the company. Anthropic launched Sonnet 5 at a price that changes the maths on agents. Alibaba has banned Claude from its offices. Microsoft cut nearly 5,000 jobs while insisting AI didn't take them. And Visa's AI agents are now buying things in Europe, with UK banks on board, plus quick hits on GPT 5.6, Gemini, California, and the IPO queue. Let's get into it. So, the big one first, Fable 5 is back. If you've been following the show for the last month, you'll know the story. Anthropic shipped its new Fable 5 and Mythos 5 models on the 9th of June, and 3 days later, the US government pulled them offline with an export control order. The trigger was a report from Amazon researchers who'd found a way past Fable 5's safeguards, getting it to identify software vulnerabilities, and in one case, write code showing how one could be exploited. The order landed late on a Friday with, reportedly, about 90 minutes to comply. Anthropic had no way to verify who was a foreign national in real time, so they switched both models off for everyone. Last week came the reversal. The Commerce Department lifted the controls on the 30th of June, and Fable 5 came back for everyone on the 1st of July. 19 days dark, and the conditions of its return tell you where all of this is heading. According to the reporting, Anthropic agreed to proactively detect and address security risks in its models, to work with the government on protocols for future releases, and to report any malicious activity it finds. They also retrained the safety classifier, and the specific technique from the Amazon report is now blocked in over 99% of cases. Researchers at the Commerce Department's AI Standards Center tested the new safeguards and called them extraordinarily strong. Anthropic's own position is worth hearing. They say every model they tested, including OpenAI's GPT 5.5, could produce the same demonstration, and they want these rules codified in regulation and applied equally to every frontier developer. Careful what you wish for, perhaps, because that's exactly what's coming. The Financial Times reported last week that the White House is in advanced talks with OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google on a voluntary framework for releasing frontier models, benchmarks, testing timelines, and rules on who gets access. An announcement could land within days. The skeleton already exists. A June executive order asks developers to give the government up to 30 days with a new model before wider release, and the order states plainly that it's voluntary and creates no licensing requirement. Critics read it differently, with some calling it a backdoor licensing regime, and their argument is simple: no act of Congress, no published standards, and no way to appeal. June rather proved their point. OpenAI's compliance was voluntary. Anthropic's was a binding export control. So as I've said in previous episodes, it's worth spending a few minutes figuring out what this means for you. If your business runs on a frontier model, availability can be pulled at short notice. So it's worth knowing which of your workflows would survive your main model going dark for 3 weeks. This episode is sponsored by Notify Technology, a health and safety software partner, helping teams run incident management, audits and inspections, and risk assessments in one place. And with Notify Spark, their AI companion, they're streamlining incident reporting and investigations, saving time, reducing admin load, and helping teams act faster on what matters. Learn more at notifytechnology.com. Next, and staying in Washington, OpenAI has proposed giving the US government 5% of the company. This came from the Financial Times last Thursday, citing people familiar with the talks, and the talks are described as conceptual. Sam Altman has reportedly discussed it directly with President Trump, Commerce Secretary Lutnick, and Treasury Secretary Bessent. At OpenAI's last valuation of $852 billion, 5% is worth a little over $42 billion. The mechanism matters. This would be a gift into a sovereign wealth fund, modeled on the Alaska Permanent Fund, the oil fund that pays Alaskans a dividend every year. And the pitch is that all the big US labs would put in 5% each, with the returns eventually going to citizens. OpenAI floated the broader public wealth fund idea back in April, in a policy paper arguing that a fund could give citizens a stake in AI-driven growth. The new, more concrete twist, according to the FT, is the 5% equity contribution, starting with OpenAI and potentially copied by the other big US labs. And it's a more moderate version of an idea already in Congress, where Senator Bernie Sanders has proposed a one-off 50% tax on the big AI companies paid in stock. The caveats are real though. Nobody else has signed up. Anthropic, Google and Meta are named in the proposal, and none of them has said a word. It would likely need an act of Congress. And per the FT, the stated aim is to secure good relations with the administration and address political blowback, which lands differently when you remember OpenAI's newest models are currently gated behind a government approval process, and the company's heading for a public listing. The nearest precedent is Intel, where the government took a roughly 10% stake by turning unpaid chips, ACT grants and other federal funding into equity. But that was public money being converted into shares. This would be different. A voluntary equity gift from a company the government regulates, buys from, and increasingly has a hand in approving. Right from politics to product. Anthropic launched Claude Sonnet 5 last Tuesday, and it's the mid-tier model punching at flagship weight. On Anthropic's own numbers, it gets close to Opus 4.8, their top model on agentic work. On one agentic coding benchmark, it scores 63% to Opus's 69, and on a knowledge work benchmark, it actually edges Opus out. It plans tasks, drives browsers and terminals, and runs on its own for long stretches. A tester at Zapier handed it a two-part job, updating Salesforce account tiers and then sending a launch announcement, and it finished the lot end-to-end. The price is the headline, $2 per million input tokens and 10 out until the end of August, then 3 and 15. Opus 4.8 lists at 5 and 25. It's also now the default model for everyone on the free and pro plans, which means most Claude users just got a serious upgrade without touching a setting. Read the footnotes before you celebrate though. Sonnet 5 uses a new tokenizer, and the same text now produces up to 35% more tokens than it did on Sonnet 4.6. Anthropic's own announcement says the introductory pricing makes the transition roughly cost neutral, so the launch discount is partly there to absorb the tokenizer change. I had to read that footnote twice. The real cut only arrives after August, and your bill depends on tokens consumed, so benchmark your own workloads rather than the list price. Different corner of AI now. Alibaba has banned Anthropic from its offices. Last week I covered Anthropic's letter to US senators accusing operators linked to Alibaba's Quen lab of the largest distillation attack it has seen, nearly 25,000 fake accounts and almost 29 million exchanges, allegedly harvesting Claude's skills to train their own models. Alibaba's answer arrived this week. An internal notice, seen by the South China Morning Post, adds Claude Code to a list of, quote, high-risk software with security vulnerabilities, and bans staff from using it at work from the 10th of July. Employees are pointed at Alibaba's own coding tool instead, and reportedly told to remove Anthropic products altogether. The trigger for the ban cuts against Anthropic too. It followed a Reddit post in which someone reverse-engineered Claude Code and found hidden region detection logic that had reportedly been shipping since the spring. The tool checked for signals like Chinese time zones and China-linked proxy or network routes, including infrastructure associated with Alibaba, Baidu and ByteDance, and sent those signals back to Anthropic. An Anthropic engineer reportedly confirmed the feature, calling it an experiment to prevent account abuse by resellers and protect against distillation, and reports say it was removed around the 1st of July, so Anthropic was watching for exactly the sort of behavior it later reported to the Senate. Potentially effective, sure, but quietly shipping undisclosed monitoring inside a developer tool is a poor look for a company selling trust. On the substance, my view from last week hasn't changed. If the distillation claim is substantiated, that's IP theft at national scale, and American investment subsidizing a rival. Alibaba has denied wrongdoing and still hasn't addressed the specifics. What we got instead is decoupling in miniature. An American lab accuses, a Chinese giant bans, and the tools split along the border. Next, jobs. Microsoft said on Monday it's cutting about 4,800 roles, around 2% of the company. Xbox is one of the hardest hit areas. About 1,600 roles are going immediately, with roughly 3,200 expected over the fiscal year in what Xbox chief Asha Sharma called the most significant restructure in Xbox history. The line from Microsoft's chief people officer, Amy Coleman, was direct. Quote, "The roles eliminated today are not being replaced by AI. In the same memo, AI is changing how work gets done. Both of those can be true, and you can see why they'd rather say the first one out loud. We've been tracking the AI layoffs question for months, and regular listeners know my read. Most of it is AI washing, ordinary cost-cutting wearing an AI costume. This week brought the strongest evidence yet on the other side of that ledger. Oracle's annual report to the SEC showed its workforce is down 21,000 people, 13% in 12 months. And the filing says, in black and white, that AI adoption across its operations has resulted, and may continue to result, in workforce reductions. A press release is marketing. A 10K is a legal document. It doesn't mean every one of those 21,000 jobs was replaced by AI, but it does mean Oracle is now formally telling investors that AI is part of the workforce reduction story. Keep the counterweight in view too. EY Parthenon's chief economist points out that only around 1 in 10 firms actually uses AI to produce goods or services, and Columbia researchers argue the main effect so far is reduced hiring, especially of juniors, rather than mass layoffs. So my read shifts a little this week, still mostly washing, but the real thing is showing up in the filings now, and entry-level jobs are where it bites first. One from closer to home. A few weeks back I covered Visa wiring its payment network into ChatGPT so agents could pay at any Visa merchant. Last Thursday in Paris, Visa announced the European rollout, and this is live, with real banks. More than 30 European issuers are on board, including Barclays, HSBC UK, Lloyds, NatWest, Nationwide and Revolut, and AI agents are now making purchases with independent merchants, including Frasers and lastminute.com. Authentication runs through Visa's payment passkeys, so every transaction is tied to a verified user and their explicit instruction, which is how it satisfies Europe's strong customer authentication rules. My position on agentic commerce hasn't moved. The win is killing checkout friction, and a network like Visa makes it credible, provided the limits and approvals actually bite. One more full story before the quick ones. Anthropic has gone into science and into drugs. Claude Science launched last Tuesday, a research workbench that plugs Claude into more than 60 scientific skills and connectors covering genomics, single-cell analysis, proteomics, structural biology and chemistry, with a reviewer agents that check citations and calculations as they go. It's in beta for paid plans now, and Anthropic is funding up to 50 research projects with up to $30,000 in credits each. Applications close on the 15th of July, so if you're anywhere near a lab, I'd get straight onto it. Alongside it, Anthropic said it plans to run its own preclinical drug discovery programs aimed at neglected diseases that Big Pharma often finds commercially unattractive. Google already has isomorphic labs, and OpenAI shipped its life sciences model Rosalind, which I covered last month, so this is the third frontier lab into the same territory. I think it's the right move, and I'd judge it on delivery. Using your own tools on real science is the credible way to build them. Quick hits before we wrap. OpenAI's GPT 5.6 models, Sol, Terra and Luna, have spent almost 2 weeks gated to a small group of government-approved organizations, but that now looks set to end. Axios reports the Trump administration has lifted the restriction, with wider rollout due from Thursday. Google's Gemini 3.5 Pro, promised for June at I.O., has slipped into July. Business Insider says early testers wanted changes and Google isn't commenting. California has signed a first-of-its-kind deal giving every state agency, city and county Claude at half price with free training thrown in. And on the IPO queue, SpaceX, which floated at $135 last month and touched roughly $225, has settled back around the mid-150s. The New York Times reports OpenAI is now leaning towards a 2027 listing, with Sam Altman reportedly treating anything under $1 trillion as a non-starter. Anthropic, for now at least, is still reportedly aiming for late this year. So what ties this week together? the state moved inside the AI industry's operating model, Washington decides when Fable 5 comes back, and who gets GPT 5.6. A framework arriving possibly this week would formalize government review before every major release. OpenAI wants the government as a shareholder. California just became Anthropic's flagship customer. And in Beijing, the same fusion runs in reverse, with the Alibaba banning American tools on security grounds. For years, the question about AI in government was when regulation would catch up. On this evidence, it has caught up in the form of partnership, ownership and gatekeeping bundled together. My take is what it was when Fable was first pulled. Some of this is sensible in principle, and the execution should worry you because access decided in private, without published standards, is a poor foundation for infrastructure everyone is building on. If AI is becoming a utility, this was the week the state started acting like it owns the grid. That's all for this week's AI Roundup. If you found value in this breakdown, please leave a rating and hit subscribe. See you next week.